on the eastern shore of Lake Tahoe. Tucked between granite boulders and dense pine forest lies a place few people ever see. Skunk Harbor. There are no signs marking its entrance. No road leads directly to its shoreline. You reach it the old way, by water or by a quiet trail that curves down through the forest. Today, it feels timeless, untouched, almost forgotten. But this small cove holds a story far larger than itself. A story that reflects the entire history of Lake Tahoe. A story of native tradition, industrial ambition, and private escape. To understand Skunk Harbor, we have to go back to a time before it even had a name. Long before settlers arrived, before maps, before Tahoe was even called Tahoe, this land belonged to the Washoe people. For thousands of years, they lived in rhythm with the seasons, moving between the Sierra Nevada and the surrounding valleys. In the summer, they came to the lake, to fish, to gather plants, to hunt in the mountains. But the lake was more than a resource. It was sacred, a center of life and balance. The shoreline provided food, materials, and shelter, but it also held meaning, spiritual and cultural, woven into every part of daily life. The quiet cove we now call Skunk Harbor would have been one of many places along the shore where the Washoe stopped and lived for a time, a place to land, to rest, to gather. Even the name tells part of the story. Skunk Harbor does not come from animals, but from a misunderstanding, a mistranslation of a Washoe word, reshaped by early settlers until its original meaning was lost. Long before it was hidden, this place was known. In 1859, everything changed. The discovery of silver in Nevada's Comstock lode triggered one of the greatest mining booms in American history. And beyond the mines, another resource became just as valuable: wood. The mines required vast amounts of timber for tunnel supports, buildings, and fuel. And the forests of Lake Tahoe became the supply. By the early 1860s, settlers established communities along the East Shore, including Glenbrook, one of the first permanent settlements in the Tahoe Basin. From there, the forest industry spread rapidly into the mountains. Massive operations took shape. Roads were carved into hillsides. Rail lines wound through steep terrain. Flumes carried timber down valleys for miles. An entire industrial network emerged, designed to move lumber from the high Sierra to the mines below. The trail to Skunk Harbor today follows one of those early routes, a dirt road built during the logging era. Beneath it lie the traces of a narrow-gauge railroad, once used to transport timber across this landscape. What feels quiet now was once busy and loud. The forests echoed with axes, machinery, and movement. Workers moved through the trees. Wagons and trains carried endless loads of cut timber. Nearby, wooden trestles stretched across ravines, imposing structures built entirely from the very trees they helped remove. And Skunk Harbor? It was never a town. It never became a center of activity like Glenbrook. Instead, it existed on the edge of this industrial world, a small, sheltered cove beneath the larger machinery of expansion. But the scale of logging was immense. By the late 1800s, much of the Tahoe Basin had been stripped of its forests, cut at an astonishing rate to fuel distant demand. And when the timber was gone, the industry disappeared with it. By the early 1900s, Lake Tahoe was changing once again. The logging era had ended. The industrial networks faded, and the lake began to attract a different kind of attention, not for what could be taken from it, but for what it offered. Cool air, clear water, quiet. Tahoe became a place of escape. Wealthy families from San Francisco and beyond began to arrive, drawn by the beauty of the lake and the promise of privacy. The East Shore, with its rugged granite coastline and hidden coves, offered something rare: seclusion. Skunk Harbor was one of those places, remote, sheltered, accessible mainly by boat. In the 1920s, the Newhall family built a stone retreat there. It was not a town, not even a full-time residence. It was a destination, a private place for gathering, boating, and summer leisure. Guests arrived by boat, stepping ashore into a secluded world far removed from everything else. Days were spent in quiet enjoyment, sunlight on the water, conversations along the shore, the stillness of a place few others could reach. For a brief time, Skunk Harbor became something entirely different. Not wilderness, not industry, but a stage for privilege and escape. In the 1930s, the property became part of the holdings of George Whittell Jr., a wealthy and reclusive figure who owned vast stretches of Tahoe's eastern shoreline. Whittell valued privacy above all else, and in preserving that privacy, he also preserved the land itself. Large-scale development never came to this part of the coast. The shoreline remained quiet, protected not by design, but by exclusion. And once again, Skunk Harbor stayed what it had always been: hidden, quiet, and largely unchanged. After Whittell's death in 1969, much of his land passed into public hands. Skunk Harbor became accessible again, but only to those willing to make the journey. There are still no direct roads to the shoreline. Visitors walk the old road through the forest, following a path shaped more than a century ago. Others arrive by boat, just as guests once did in the 1920s. Today, the harbor sits within protected land, bordered by national forest and near Washoe territory. The landscape remains remarkably intact. The old road still winds down the hillside. The faint traces of the railroad remain beneath the surface. And near the water's edge, the weathered stone structure still stands, the last visible remnant of the harbor's brief moment as a private retreat. There are no stores here, no signs marking its history, no obvious reminders of what once took place. Only water, forest, stone, and the quiet presence of time. Skunk Harbor was never a town. It was never a center of industry or a permanent community. And that is precisely what makes it remarkable. Because here, in one small and secluded cove, you can still see the layers of Tahoe's past. The presence of the Washoe people, who lived with and understood the land. The impact of the logging era, when the forest was consumed to fuel distant ambition. The echoes of private retreat, when wealth and isolation reshaped the shoreline. And finally, a return to quiet. Skunk Harbor endured not because it was developed, but because it was overlooked, because it remained just out of reach. And if you stand at the shoreline long enough, listening to the water, watching the light move across the lake, you begin to understand. Skunk Harbor was never meant to be found easily. It was meant to be discovered.